My name is Carlin Borisenko, and you're listening to the Actively Unwoke podcast. Well, I do apologize for the delay between episodes. Life happens, and I can make a bunch of excuses, but the fact of the matter is that in the past several weeks, I've really been focusing on building out my premium content offering over at Carlyn.substack.com, which is kind of my content home base now. Substack is a wonderful tool with so many features. And honestly, I have been able to reach so many more people than through traditional methods. It's just been amazing. And we're really cultivating a community of people who want to learn this information, want to understand, want to have a nuanced perspective. And that's all been really great. So I've been building out all of this premium content. I've been trying to kind of revitalize my YouTube channel. That's going really well, getting new audience members in and learning about the woke ideology and, even more scary, the far left socialists and all that. And this podcast, sadly, was something that just took a back seat, mostly because I was focusing on creating premium content. And this is a free podcast. This will always be a free podcast. I will never stop making free content. But when you're creating premium content, you want to keep it premium. I have actually now launched a premium podcast. It's called The Inner Circle. It's over. You can subscribe at Carlyn, Karlyn.substack.com. Become a premium supporter on there. You will get access to the podcast. And it's basically a lot like this one, except I amped up the production quality just a smidge. And I'm reading and discussing my premium content for the people that are paying to fund that content. Now, there's always a free preview to it. And I do try to make my free previews on that particular podcast really kind of meaty. So even in the free preview, you're getting really good information. I think really good information. And then if you want to go more in depth behind the paywall, you're able to do that. So, but that's not the topic of this podcast today, because I did just create a new free article last night over on the Substack, and I have to tell you guys about this because this is crazy. It is so funny how the world works, and how chickens come home to roost, and how something that might happen a couple of years ago suddenly has relevance again. So I covered this story from Fox News. The headline is Colorado Teachers Union passes resolution declaring capitalism inherently exploits children and public schools. This was published on May the 4th. May the 4th be with you, last week. And I covered this story on my show yesterday on my YouTube channel. Well, I was very surprised to find that there was a familiar name associated with this resolution in Colorado, in which the teachers union declared that capitalism was inherently exploitative of children and public schools. And the reason that I was a bit surprised at the name is because I recognized it. Because I had a run-in with the Colorado teacher who submitted and championed this resolution for the teachers union 2 years ago. I exposed this guy 2 years ago. Now, you can see all the receipts over on Carlyn.substack.com. The title of the article is I Told You This Teacher Was a Marxist 2 years ago, and now he's convinced Colorado teachers to denounce capitalism. It's not funny, but we have to laugh. Otherwise, we'll cry, right? So let me read you this article, and I'm going to start off by reading just a few sentences from the Fox News article, and then I will read you the article and introduce you to the teacher who brought this union before brought the resolution rather before the teachers union. And I will read you some of this person's tweets, but if you want to see all the receipts, all of this is documented over on the Substack. You can see all the images for yourself and judge for yourself what you think. But going back to this article, let me just read you a couple of paragraphs. The Colorado Education Association reportedly passed a resolution that declares that capitalism inherently exploits children, public schools, land, labor, and resources. The final version of the resolution that was passed states the CEA, which is the teachers union, the CEA is the teachers union, believes that capitalism requires exploitation of children, public lands, excuse me, I'm going to start again. The CEA believes that capitalism requires exploitation of children, public schools, land, labor, and resources. Capitalism is in opposition to fully addressing systemic racism, the school to prison pipeline, climate change, patriarchy, gender and LGBTQ disparities, education inequity, and income inequity. And then they share a screenshot of the original resolution, because the original resolution was not the one that actually passed. To just give the Colorado Teachers Union just a smidgen of credit, they made the resolution a lot less Marxist before they actually passed it. But let me read you what the original resolution says. The CEA believes that capitalism requires exploitation of children, public schools, land, labor, and/or resources, and therefore the only way to fully address systemic racism, the school to prison pipeline, climate change, patriarchy, gender and LGBTQ disparities, education inequality, and income inequality, and this is the part that matters, is to dismantle capitalism and replace it with a new, equitable economic system. And under reason for submitting, they state, we are constantly using band-aids and minor reforms to make things better, which is good, but the system itself is the problem, and it needs to be named now. For those of you who have been following my content for a while, I have been extremely consistent in reminding you that the four goals of the woke left are always and forever the same: gain as much power as possible, destabilize the system, attack capitalism, usher in their Marxist utopia. And wouldn't you know it, this resolution, the original one, and honestly the one they passed too, but we're going to focus in on the original one for a moment. The original one has literally all four goals. Quite literally every single one of them, because the woke left is always trying to meet at least one of those goals, but sometimes they accidentally meet two or three or even all four in a single tactic. So let me explain. Brian Lindstrom is the name of the teacher who introduced this resolution. We're going to come back to Brian in a second. I will let you know how I met Brian 2 years ago in a moment, but for right now, Brian is the name of the person who has introduced this resolution. Brian has gained a position of power within the educational establishment in Colorado. Brian has run for public office on several occasions. And Brian is using a position of influence, and influence is both official influence, like the position you have, but it's also the power of soft influence, politicking, stuff like that. Brian is using the influence that he has in order to get the teachers in Colorado to quite literally denounce capitalism. That's goal number one. Goal number two, destabilize the system. Brian is quite literally saying that the system that we all exist in, is causing systemic racism, the school to prison pipeline, climate change, patriarchy, gender and LGBTQ disparities, educational inequality, and income inequality. So he's arguing that the system that we're currently existing in is responsible for all of these problems, and it exploits children, and it exploits public school and land and labor and resources, and that's an attempt to destabilize what we've built. Then Brian says, our only solution is to dismantle capitalism. That's the third goal, attack capitalism. And then the fourth goal, Brian says, and replace it with a new, equitable economic system. That's Marxism, folks. So Brian Lindstrom, teacher, Colorado, literally achieved all four goals. Well, he didn't achieve, strove to achieve all four goals of the woke left: gain as much power as possible, destabilize the system, attack capitalism, usher in a Marxist utopia in a single one paragraph resolution. You have to give him credit. It really is quite an impressive feat. But we really should have known about Brian. We really should have known that all this was coming. Because for many of you, I understand this is your first time meeting Brian, but this is not my first time meeting Brian. I met Brian 2 years ago on Twitter when I outed him for teaching critical race theory in his history class. And this is a tweet from June 11th, 2021. And Brian says, with pronouns in his bio, of course, Brian Lindstrom, he, him, I'm going on record now. At the end of the day, it's just my students and me in our classroom, and we will be discussing race, class, gender in my history class, regardless of what laws and policies people want to pass. Critical race theory is a component of everything I do. I teach African American history, Latin American history, and world history, focus on social movements, and people are surprised that race, class, and gender get discussed. Well, several days later, I found that tweet. I think someone sent it to me, if I recall, and I made it go viral. I retweeted on the internet. This is when my Twitter account was very, very active. It was very easy for me to make these things go viral. And all I said was history teacher saying the quiet part out loud. And then I grabbed a screenshot of it because you always take screenshots before you do anything. And as soon as I retweeted Brian earlier, he blocked me. Not that you can't always get around to block, that's just the way it works. But I did have the screenshot, so it didn't really matter that he blocked me. And get this, the reason that I remembered this, I'm pretty sure when I read the Fox News article yesterday and I saw Brian's name, I was like, I know that name. Where's that name from? I even wrote about Brian in my book, Actively Unwoke, the ultimate guide for fighting back against the woke insanity in your life. I wrote about him in my book. Here's an excerpt from chapter 5. Also in June 2021, a high school history teacher in Colorado proudly tweeted, I'm going on record now. At the end of the day, it's just my students and me in our classroom, and we will be discussing race, class, gender, and history class, regardless of what laws or policies people want to pass. Critical race theory is a component of everything I do. I featured Brian in among a long list of instances in which public school teachers were speaking out saying, we don't care what laws you pass, we're going to do what we want. But no one should have been surprised by this, because if they had looked at Brian's Twitter account, Brian has been an activist for years. I took a little trip through Brian's Twitter account last night, and I'm going to read you some of the tweets that I found. And these tweets are in chronological order. I started with ones in 2019, but we come up to 2023. So Brian seems to have gotten actually more militant in his ideology. And he is a Marxist, by the way, just so we're really clear. And he's actually going to talk about Marxism in these tweets. But I'm just going to go down the list. And again, you can find the screenshots for yourself at carlin.substack.com. On May 7th, 2019, Brian tweets, he retweeted AOC, and he said, in case you're unsure, systemic racism is a fact, Black Lives Matter, and white privilege is real, and I benefit from it, and it is my duty to be actively anti-racist. This is why housing and education justice are among my biggest passions. This is when Brian was running for public office. February 18th, 2020. But the people in the photos are all POC and or queer folks, FOLX. No white males at all. August 11th, 2020. Money for both the firearm and the safe to keep them in. I tend to follow Marx on the topic of guns. He's a Marxist. September 1st, 2020. Can you be anti-racist and anti-patriarchy without being anti-capitalism? October 7th, 2020. All the history of the hitherto existing society in the history of class struggles, Marx. He's quoting Marx in that tweet. November 4th, 2020. Why is the race so close? Don't they see how racist he is? He's talking about Donald Trump in the 2020 election. Yes, he's racist. But just calling all Trump supporters racist really ignores the fault of all of us in this. Since Carter, the Democrats have stopped caring about workers, and now many of the blue collar workers are done. He is literally telling you that he is further left than the Democrats. What's further left than the Democrats? December 3rd, 2020. Them. They're falling behind. Me. Behind what? We literally made up the standard and graduation requirements. We can just change them. This is the result of capitalism, plain and simple. We're predisposed to believe that everyone has to be productive at all times. There's so much to unpack in this tweet. Brian is talking about the learning loss that students endured during the pandemic, and Brian, as a high school history teacher, doesn't seem to think this is that big of a deal. He literally just says, you say they're falling behind, why don't we just change the standard? You know, people don't have to be productive at all times. People only believe that they need to be productive because capitalism tells them they need to be productive. But we can just change the standard. That'll fix everything. We can just lower it across the board. That is literally what he's saying. This is a teacher in Colorado telling you that the very best solution to the problem is to lower the standards that we expect for students, and that will fix learning loss. Let's keep going. January 22nd, 2021. Capitalism supports racism. Capitalism supports heteropatriarchy. Capitalism supports ageism. Capitalism supports ableism. Capitalism supports imperialism. So you can't be anti racism and anti heteropatriarchy, anti war, or anti ableism without being anti capitalism. March 1st, 2021. I think most people who support capitalism don't do so because it's working well for them. It's because they can't imagine a world without trading time for money or other commodification of everything. My fellow educators and I need to do better with getting our students to imagine something new. March 24th, 2021. I'm sick of talking about band aid solutions and performative gestures. The elephant in the room is capitalism. End it, and we will solve so many of the plaguing issues. Now, what's interesting about that tweet is it sounds a lot like the reason for submitting this resolution to the Colorado Teachers Union that Brian submitted just last week and that a modified version was passed. The reason Brian said for submitting this resolution was we are constantly using band aids and minor reforms to make things better, which is good, but the system itself is a problem and needs to be named. 2 years ago, Brian tweeted publicly, I'm sick and tired of talking about band-aid solutions and performative gestures. The elephant in the room is capitalism. End it and we will solve so many of these plaguing issues. You have got to check the social media of your kids' teachers, guys. I know it seems silly, but these are the kinds of things you can uncover. And if people had identified Brian 2 years ago, maybe they could have stopped him from getting as far as he did to introduce the resolution denouncing capitalism to the Colorado Teachers Union. Maybe not. Who knows? We don't know what could have happened. But he was doing this out in the public. April 28th, 2021. Capitalism is giving the wolf control over the flock. Socialism is giving the flock control over the flock. April 29th, 2021. Propaganda tells us that socialism takes away our freedoms. That's simply untrue. Production is made of capital, labor, and land use. Socialism versus capitalism is a debate over who should control the land. Capitalists say it should be those with capital, and socialists say the workers. June 16th, 2021. Apparently, people think tagging my school district on my post is going to get me to stop being vocal and anti-racist inside and outside of my classroom. My guy, I'm just as vocal to my principal and my superintendent. You think the person running the district social media is going to stop me? That was after I made Brian's original tweet go viral. It was quite literally on the same day that I did it. June 23rd, 2021. Critical race theory is the new Red Scare. June 28th, 2021. Gender is a construct, my friend. We should all be relative enough to still be seeking clarity at any age. Thanks for sharing with us. July 1st, 2021. We don't have to be friends. We don't have to pick sides. Solidarity with the proletariat and fight for liberation together. That's language that socialists use. July 6, 2021. In the veil of ignorance thought exercise, no one chooses capitalism. August 31st, 2022. Protect trans youth, BAM. BAM means by any means necessary. November 26, 2021. Capitalism benefits from the patriarchy. You can't have class consciousness while ignoring entire classes of people. September 18th, 2022, and this he's responding to Daniel Buck. Daniel Buck is a teacher, and Daniel Buck literally tweeted, "I'm a teacher, teachers are paid enough." And Brian responded, "You literally get paid to push anti-teacher, anti-union, racist, classist propaganda." December 20th, 2022. There's no voluntary work under capitalism. The threat of starvation and homelessness is coercive. December 18th, 2022. In this, he's replying to a woman named Justine. Justine tweeted, "At a holiday gathering last night, a friend told me, 'You haven't had kids or even been married. What happened?' And then she proceeds to warn me that one day I will be eating turkey dinner all alone if I don't figure it out. So happy holidays to me." Brian responded, "Internalized capitalism and rugged individualism. We couldn't possibly be happy being a member of a grander community. You must create a mini community of biologically connected people in order to be connected with. I'm sorry that viewpoint got vomited onto you." Brian is now waffling around abolish the biological family, which I've covered several times on my channel on Socialism Saturday. I've covered it several times on my Substack. There is a movement within the socialist left to abolish the biological family, and Brian is now tiptoeing around that. May 3rd, 2023, Brian is responding to a guy who posted a meme, and the meme is of an empty store, and it says "Socialism for Dummies. Everything is free, but we're all out of it." And Brian said, "This is literally a photo of a store under capitalism." In this one, Brian is responding to an account called Trash Panda with an anime icon and a trans flag. And this account tweeted, "What do you consider to be the bare minimum qualifications for someone to be considered a quote unquote leftist?" And Brian responded, "Capitalism, bad." And lastly, or the last one that I have, because I could probably spend all day reading Brian's tweets and they just get crazier and crazier and crazier. But this one is from just yesterday, May 8th, 2023. Why is it so hard to realize that gender and sexuality are fluid spectrums versus fixed binaries? People like what they like and are who they are, and you don't have to understand it or even like it to realize it's none of your concern, and their rights shouldn't be dependent on your feels. How many conservative parents had their kids taught by Brian because they didn't think to check his social media? Never think this is a silly step, guys. Sometimes it's the only step that's necessary to see what's going on. Search their social media for words like capitalism, Marx, Marxism, patriarchy, critical race theory, whiteness, anti-racism, gender, non-binary, trans, transphobe, liberation, abolition, proletariat. That's a really good list to start with. It's not a comprehensive list. If you want the list in writing, you can visit my Substack and find the article that I wrote because it's all in the article, freely available. But search for those words and see what comes up. Best case scenario is you will find nothing. But if your child's social media looks like Brian, or your child's teacher's social media rather looks like Brian's, I promise you'd want to know about it. So how would you guys feel if Brian was teaching your kids? Let me know. Head over to the Substack, leave a comment. I really would like to know what you think. that is all for this episode. Thank you for hanging out. I will try to be a bit more consistent in my posting, I promise. But in the meantime, please head over to Carlyn, KARLYN.substack.com, and consider subscribing for free. You will be the very first to know about all of the articles that I post. And if you want to support the work I'm doing, the very best way is to support it through the Substack with a paid subscription, $5 a month, $50 a year. That will get you access to all of my premium content. And there are other ways to support me as well. You can go to activelyunwoke.com/support. I have a locals community you can sign up for, which is great. I have a Patreon. You can make a one-time gift, whatever works for you. I just really want to encourage people to use Substack because I just think it's one of the best tools on the internet. I really do. All right, guys, that's all I have for this one. Take care. We'll see you next time.